plays. But if the goal is just to go out there and let him work through it, tweet through it in real life, if you will, then you just stick with him, and I think you give him a longer leash.
Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live on a Friday, October the 11th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at Broadway Sports Media. You can follow me on X, whatever you like to call it, at JT_Ruhnke. I'm always joined here on a Hot Read Happy Hour Friday with my lovely co-host, Stoney Keeley, editor-in-chief over at Sobros Network, 1/3 of Football and Other F-Words podcast, and co-writer over at StackingTheInbox.com. Stoney, how are you doing on this wonderful Friday?
JT, I'm doing great. I am stoked. I'm fired up for another Hot Read Happy Hour. I got a little Oktoberfest going in the Bluegrass Cup today. Just checked the mail, got some Yankee Candle coupons. The holiday season is approaching, and I'm going to be ready for it. We're going to get out there. We're going to get some candles, and I'm stoked for the weekend, man. I'm stoked for this Titans-Colts game because it feels like it's been forever since we've had a Titans game to actually talk about. So I'm ready to get back into it. I'm chomping at the bit.
It is pretty interesting how it's literally just been a week, but it feels like it's been like 2 or 3 months. And Daniel joining us in the comments here saying, does this absolve Easton? I do have to, it was planned. We obviously got a late start today, but that, not because I was behind or anything, and that traffic in Nashville is absolutely horrendous. No, my friends. It was because I was paying homage to a host of this show gone by, which is Easton Freeze. Had to give him the homage today and do that by showing up late to our show today, of course. But if you would like to join the comment section like Daniel over here, do us a favor and head on over to the Broadway Sports Media or 440 Sports YouTube channel if you're watching over on Facebook or Twitter, and you can join him in making fun of us for being late again once, as we... It was planned. It was definitely planned. But you are right, my friend, that it is a happy hour, Hot Read Happy Hour this week, and we could not have such a happy hour without our wonderful sponsors, Sinkers Beverages and their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages. We are proudly sponsored by both of them. If you do not know, if you know 440, I should say, rather, you know them. If not, we are happy to introduce you. Thanks again to Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring the show. More on them later. Stoney, I am, like you said, absolutely fired up to talk about a Titans divisional game. I've got my flannel on here. The as some people in the Hot Read community call it, the shirt. This is a highly contested shirt, I might add, as yesterday I was producing Paul Kaharski's podcast, in which he decided to go on air and say that, he's like, JT, do you want to come out and say something on my show? Obviously, I could not because I was in the media workroom and didn't want to disturb other people doing their lovely work. But then he has to take it a step further and say maybe that I did not want to go on the show because I was wearing he calls it a weird shirt. I took offense to that. When he came back, I made it a note to say, hey, what's wrong with my shirt? And he then kind of took a couple steps back and called it, it's not a weird shirt, it's a fancy shirt. So, it's just not, it's something he doesn't understand. But I had to wear it today because I'm feeling good about this Titans matchup against the Colts. It is their first of, I guess, 6. That's how many divisional games they play. Good job, JT. Good math.
It is.
But the first of 6 divisional games, the first one here at home against a Colts team. And there's a lot to unpack with this matchup, not only from both sides, but you got to remember how banged up both these teams are at times. Specifically, it feels like it's a Freaky Friday and the roles have been reversed as the Colts are taking on the Titans' famous laundry list of injuries here, where the Titans do have some guys who are also out this week, but we'll get to that in a second. I do want to start off today's show, though, talking about the Colts with something very special, and that is if you may not know, there is a special Colts fan out there who does a Colts anthem every single week. And this week it is the Titans week. And we have to react to this video because, sometimes I feel like the opponent of the Colts either wins or loses by how good of a anthem Seth does this week. And so without further ado, we're going to take a look at Seth's video this week. And Stoney, get your thoughts on if the Titans are in trouble or not. So here we go with, oh, that is the wrong button. But here we go with said video of Seth this week.
This is our Colts, this is our team, we bleed blue. This is our Colts, whether win or lose, we love them. For the shoe, beat the Titans, let's show them that we'll horseshoe them up. This is our team, go Colts!
Can never forget the classic neigh there at the end, but I gotta be honest, not his finest work. I don't know if you're privy to some of the other ones that he's done, but let's horseshoe them up. I felt like you could have probably have found something a little better than that. And so, you know, just from that standpoint, I think the Titans are going to absolutely steamroll the Indianapolis Colts this week. Just not a great performance from Seth, top to bottom. Your thoughts, Stoney?
I'm with you, JT. Listen, I have been supporting Seth up until this week, but now it is Titans Colts hate week. I'm not going to stand for it. I dare someone from Indianapolis to come down here and try to horseshoe me up, buddy. Let's see how that goes for you, okay? This is personal. This is it's no longer just business, it's personal, and I'm personally offended that he didn't bring his A game for this video. It's the Titans week. That's how much you think of the Titans, Seth? You can't even come up with something better than we're going to horseshoe them up? Give me a break, Seth. Give me a break. Do you know if he watches the Read podcast?
I don't know, but if he does, we've lost one viewer, I think, or one listener of the Hot Read podcast, if so, because that is some harsh criticism, and I think it's deservedly so. As Daniel chimes in the comments here as well, he says, "Yeah, his Titans lyrics were his worst showing of the season. Horseshoe them up, come on, Seth." And it's not because I don't like Seth. I think he does a very good job, but we've come to expect better from Seth, and I think this is some constructive criticism. It comes from a place of love because we've seen what he can do in the past, and you know, I think that's indicative of the Titans week this week in what I think has become a must-win game for both teams.
Hang on, JT. Speak for yourself, because I'm trying to start a fight on here.
Oh, okay.
Continue. Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, okay. Yeah. So obviously two different criticisms of Seth this week. But as Kenneth points out in the comments, this is the first ever must-win game for Levis, not just for the Titans season, but for his career, period. Redemption path or get off my team, Mayo boy. I do think that it's a must-win game for different reasons for both teams. I think on one hand, with the Titans, Will Levis getting back in the saddle, as we got confirmed today by Brian Callahan. Will Levis will get the start this week. And, you know, it's a must win for him because he saw his team win with the backup quarterback and get the results that the locker room and this team and the fan base want. Now it's your time to shine, and you're going up against a team who is very much banged up. And if you cannot get the same results as your backup quarterback, that's only going to make the case for continuing to start you that much tougher for to make the case that Will Levis should continue to be the quarterback of this team. But for the Colts as well, they've already played 2 divisional games and have lost both of them. This is a monumental game for a Colts team that has playoff aspirations. Whether they are going through a lot of adversity with their quarterback situation, with who they have out, a lot of their key position players out this week. We'll get into that in just a second, but it almost feels like if the Colts, for them specifically, if they were to lose this game, you are now 0-3 in your division against divisional opponents. That feels like an insurmountable, amount of games to come back from if you want to win the division.
Yeah, I think this is a massive game for both of these teams. The Colts, you're talking about potentially already being out of the divisional race in mid-October. That is not good, folks. For the Titans, you're talking about potentially slipping to 1-4. This is a team that is not particularly playing well right now, and to go 3 games under 500, you got to win 3 just to get back to that mark. And your next 3 after this happen to be Buffalo, Detroit, and then New England. And I know people are going to scoff at New England. They're going to Drake May at this point, who I really don't think is going to be very good in this league. But that defense is no joke. I mean, for an offense that's struggling right now, that defense is not going to be an easy matchup. And you're asking them, okay, well, just get back to 500. At this point in the season, man, we're going to be five games in after Sunday. And if the Titans are 3 games down at that point, I think it is going to be quite the tall task. They'll need a miracle to dig out of that hole. The good thing is they do have the remainder of their division games on the schedule still. So they'd have 5 more to maybe make some noise there, but I don't know what would inspire confidence that they're going to get things right, because they haven't gotten things right just yet. If they want anything to happen this season, I think Sunday is a must win.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we can then move the conversation over to said injury report. And the Titans are going to have, for the most part, a full cast of characters to compete against the Indianapolis Colts. The only 3 players who will not be going in this week's game is safety Jamal Adams, who continues to deal with that hip injury. It's not like he was making much of a impact anyways. You know, Denard Wilson commented on yesterday about how little, I should say, that he's played. And it's more of him getting through that injury and also just trying to figure out where he exactly fits on this defensive side of the ball, especially with how good Quandre Diggs and Amani Hooker are playing. It feels like he's become more of a rotational piece, but can't stay healthy. That's kind of been the narrative with him since he went. But he will not go tomorrow. Keandre Coburn, who has been quite the surprise, I feel like he's been sneaky impactful for this team through the first 4 games of the season. He will not go tomorrow, or I should say Sunday. And then Cedric Gray, who was designated to return from IR this week, also not going. So that's 1 out of 3 weeks that he will get to come back and have the chance to come back. It won't happen this week. We'll have to see next week. Then we turn to the Indianapolis Colts side of things, where there's only 1 player currently out for this team ahead of Sunday's game. You have Jonathan Taylor. No Jonathan Taylor for this Indianapolis team. And while that may seem like it is a very good thing, we know in the past how much Indianapolis has been able to run all over the Titans' strong run defense with backup running backs. Last year, Zach Moss had maybe a career day against the Tennessee Titans. Granted, that was at a time where they didn't have their run stuffing number 1 run stuffer in Tier Tart last year. But now this year you do have T'Vondre Sweat, who has proven to be a force in the run game, as well as Jeffrey Simmons also coming back. He will be full go this week as well on the defensive line. So maybe not the biggest loss or for this Indianapolis Colts team. But then you have guys like Anthony Richardson, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, who I think is the weirdest one. That's one where it's very strange. Earlier in the week, there were reports that Michael Pittman could be an IR candidate dealing with a back injury. Now, 3 days later, he is full participation at Friday's practice and is questionable. And so, you know, it's really interesting to see how the Titans will have to prepare for a team like the Colts, who, one, it seems like Anthony Richardson is going to play, but you never know. You know, Joe Flacco could end up getting the start here. But then you also have this and Josh Downs and Michael Pittman, who, you know, that's a huge deal, whether or not Michael Pittman or Josh Downs goes this week. Especially, I think, Josh Downs, who has had a lot of success against the Titans in the past. And I think they're going to look to use him early and often in this game. Similar to the way Green Bay was able to use Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs against the interior linebackers in that game.
Yeah, and I think the quarterback conversation makes Josh Downs particularly interesting, because I watched the last couple of games with Flacco in, and he has really good chemistry with Josh Downs. And they lined him up all over the field, used him in motion. They had him all over the place, and he was dinking and dunking. A lot of people, if you think back to Josh Downs' like college tape, he kind of projected a guy that, oh, he's speedy and shifty out of the slot. He's going to get over middle, get open, and he's going to be a big yak guy, big play. That's not really how they've used him. They've used him kind of almost like a possession guy, as just hey, get the ball to him in space and see if he can make a man miss. Alec Pierce has really been their deep threat guy over the last couple of weeks, but Josh Downs does present a bit of a dilemma as the death by a million paper cuts kind of receiver. It's always a threat to make a guy miss and take the ball upfield. I think specifically if Joe Flacco plays in this game and Josh Downs plays in the games, that's a matchup that the Titans will want to stop, because Joe Flacco, say what you will about the guy being old and being slow and all that, he's still very precise with the football. He's very decisive. He is quick getting the ball up. He looks like a seasoned pro, and that helps the efficiency of this Indianapolis offense go. Of course, it helps to have an offensive line that can at least pass protect from one half of the unit there. I think Joe Flacco is kind of a threat, particularly if he can get the chemistry going with Josh Downs again. Michael Pittman, I think, is a matchup guy that Shane Steichen will want to use. I made a joke earlier on Twitter today when the news came that Michael Pittman was now a possibility to play on Sunday, that Indianapolis watched Green Bay put Christian Watson in the slot on Roger McCreary and run the corner fade route. And they're like, damn, we got to get Michael Pittman in the slot for this game. But he really is, because of his size, his length, his reliability. He's a big, strong guy, strong hands. I think he's a guy that they'll try to leverage in those matchup situations against maybe some of the more inexperienced corners from the Titans, guys that he can kind of create space against. And I think it's an important piece, man. If Pittman and Downs go, it drastically changes the complexion of what this Colts passing game can do.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And then you never can count out an 80 thing like that. I think he is also a decent vertical threat for this team, even though it really hasn't worked. But when Anthony Richardson plays, they love to target him down the field, just like with Alec Pierce. So I think there's going to be a lot of matchups to watch this week, especially in the secondary from that standpoint. From the Titans standpoint, what do they have to do against this Colts defense to secure a victory this week? And I think the easiest answer is it starts with Will Levis as he gets the start. He comes off that joint AC sprain from 2 weeks ago. Obviously, we knew that he probably wouldn't have played last week, but would be healthy enough to go a week after that, and that we are here now. And so we got to talk to Nick Holtz about Will Levis's progression this week and how he's looked so far. Here's what the offensive coordinator had to say.
I think there's, when you're coming off kind of an injury and, the week off was really good for him, and finally getting him out there was our first day, Monday. And he threw a little bit, and then yesterday he felt pretty good. So I think I think now he's kind of getting confidence and feeling that he's more comfortable getting after, kind of banging up the shoulder a little bit. But I think that week off kind of came at a good time for him and for all of us.
And so it feels like Nick Holtz agrees that the bye came at a really nice time for this team to get Will Levis back on track. But I do wonder, Stoney, and this is a question I want to ask both you and the chat if you are joining us live here. Friendly reminder, if you're watching us on Twitter or Facebook, head on over to the Broadway Sports Media or 440 Sports YouTube pages where you can interact with the rest of the chat, like Chef Rand, Kenneth, Eddie, Jake Robertson, all these guys over here. The question I want to ask to you, obviously, we've seen baby steps of progress for Will Levis, but you trot him back out there this week, and in the second or third drive, you might see Will Levis revert and make one of those boneheaded plays. Considering that this is a winnable, very winnable game against an Indianapolis Colts team, a divisional opponent where you need this game essentially to get back, to have a dog in the fight at all to make the playoffs this year, does Will Levis have a short leash in this game? In terms of you're kind of going up against a similar Colts defense in terms of what they saw with Miami, where you should be able to run the ball pretty effectively against this Colts team. And so I wonder if we see those boneheaded mistakes, if Will Levis might have a short leash in this game when you consider how winnable this game looks.
And I think, first of all, the possibility that he could throw one of these boneheaded picks is quite high. And I know people are talking about this Colts team like they're going to roll over and die on Sunday, but they're down a lot of bodies. But schematically, I think they present a challenge for Will Levis, who seems to be struggling to like see the field, process through his reads, and find the open man. This is a Gus Bradley defense. They play a lot of cover 3. They want to rush 4 and then drop everybody else into coverage. All eyes are on the quarterback in that situation. It makes it hard for Will Levis to kind of go through and read who's going where. Throwing lanes are clogged up. It's very much a read through this, find the open man kind of defense, and that has been something that he's struggled against. So I do think it's possible that Will Levis could struggle to really get it going in this game, and people don't want to hear that, but you look at his track record so far this season against similar defenses, and it hasn't really been that great. So they don't have the personnel to really generate the pass rush that they want to with 4 right now. They're down their best defensive back. They're down a few defensive backs, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So I think this would be a chance for Will Levis to kind of get things right. We'll see on Sunday. And ultimately, I don't have a lot of faith that he's going to come out and just have miraculously cleaned all of this stuff up over the bye week. Now, as far as the leash goes, we have a blind spot here because we don't really know for sure what the goals of Brian Callahan and Nick Holtz are with this situation. If they are wanting to win this game by any means necessary, the bottom line is that unless there is just a remarkable improvement from Will Levis over the bye week, Mason Rudolph probably gives you a better chance to win this game against a defense that is predicated on confusing you and clogging up those lanes and forcing you to be surgical and precise in how you find the open man. I think Mason Rudolph is better suited to attack that style of defense. So I would say if the goal is to just win the game, like you can't leave Nissan Stadium Sunday without a win. I think Will Levis does have a release, and you put Mason Rudolph in when he does make one of those boneheaded plays. But if the goal is just to go out there and let him work through it, tweet through it in real life, if you will, then you just stick with him, and I think you give him a longer leash.
The Gen Z kids would call that thugging it out, so to say, here with Will Levis. There are people also in the comments here who agree that Will Levis should play win, lose, or tie. I think that's ultimately the right answer, considering where this team is at right now in the grand scheme of things. But that's yet to be seen. Like you said, it's a blind spot because we simply just don't know what they're thinking. But I think you bring up an interesting point that this is a very attackable secondary the Indianapolis Colts have right now, with how many injuries they have. And how you're going to be able to attack that is that they must start fast, like we continue to say, and they have to get the ball to DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley. I think we've talked about it now for 2 weeks or so, that it's been pretty unacceptable, the amount of time that they have, or the amount of volume that DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley have gotten so far. And so I think if you want to see Will Levis have success against this Indianapolis Colts team, you almost feel like you kind of have to force feed your 2 top targets here. And that's something we asked Nick Holtz earlier this week, or I should say yesterday, about, how do you feel through 4 games, how you're utilizing your 2 top targets on the outside. And here's what Nick Holtz had to say on how acceptable their performance has been so far.
Not satisfied, to be very honest. The second half of really the Miami game, we, like we said, turned into a 4-minute drill, kind of took down, and then you go to Green Bay, we had some targets lined up for those guys, and there was some pass protection issues and quarterback hits. And I know now it feels, with the bye, it feels like it was, a month ago, but it wasn't that long ago. So then that's really where the start of that lack of production came up. You go back to the Jet game, we're still getting D-Hop going, so he's still kind of on the pitch count and really had targets. He had a couple big plays down the field. So it's really been 2 games, and I would say it's really been a game and a half. So if you take the Packers game, first half of the Dolphins game, and then the second half to me is a little bit of a wash. But that being said, it's important for us to get the ball to those guys, and you can't win in the NFL by just being a 22 personnel run team, hoping that they don't score. And we got a great defense and that, but we got to do our part too. And those guys are going to be big factors for us going forward.
Yeah, and no matter what you see from their performance, or, we don't have to talk about the money or anything like that, but these are your two top guys here. And like he says, it's not been satisfactory enough. And I think a lot of that has to do with the play calling. And, it's weird that, like, with this team being down so much, the fact that they haven't tried to force feed those two the ball a little bit more, considering how many down and distances and how much they've been playing from behind. This is obviously a game where I think, much like the Miami game, they'll probably continue to see the same game script, or want to play the same game script of get out fast and early, and then kind of control the clock and play that 4-minute drill down the stretch for the rest of the game there. But I think with the offensive firepower that the Indianapolis Colts do possess from time to time, I don't think you can count them out. And so I think throughout the game, you have to get these two guys going.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. And I do think that this is a matchup that they can exploit. I think the Colts secondary, the guys that were playing last week anyway against Jacksonville, really struggled with Brian Thomas Jr.'s speed. I was a big fan of his coming out of the draft. And it seemed like at will they were able to get him like 3 feet, 3 steps behind the Colts defensive backs and get the ball to him. He had a big touchdown in that game, but their game plan was really interesting, really effective. And I wonder how equipped the Titans are to execute something like that, the way the Colts defense kind of drops back into coverage. Jacksonville said, okay, if you're only going to rush 4, we got to tank Bigsby here. We're just going to run right up the middle, and we're going to run through you. And if you're not going to give anything up down the field, we're just going to hit the flats. We're just going to dump these passes off and see if our guys can pick up 2 or 3 yards. And eventually the Colts start coming up to play those short plays to help with the run game, to defend the flat and that sort of thing. And that's when, boom, you throw the ball 20 yards down the field, and for some reason Brian Thomas Jr. is like 5 yards behind the cornerback, and there's just no shot for the guy to catch up to him. So I think that's a really interesting dynamic at play here. I think it is something that Calvin Ridley has the speed to capitalize on. You just got to get him the ball. So I do think that should be a focal point of this offense. I think that's a matchup that does favor the Titans when you talk about Calvin Ridley's speed going up against these Colts backups, essentially.
Yeah, I think you're totally right there. There's been a lot of talk as well about how, a lack of explosiveness from Will Levis, those plays we saw in the Atlanta Falcons game, in the Miami Dolphins game last year, in the Pittsburgh Steelers game last year, those have just really not been existent this season. So I think that's a big thing when you talk about trying to take the top off this defense. That's something that they're going to have to use Will Levis. A couple other people in the chat here kind of chiming in on the Will Levis short leash situation here. Eddie says that this team should be a revolutionary 2-quarterback system. I don't know, that could work. We saw Mike Vrabel try to do that last year in the preseason. I don't know how well that worked between Will Levis and Malik Willis, but you never know. Maybe it's time again. But Kenneth saying, I think he stays no matter what. If you pull the plug on Levis, they this instantly becomes a tank season. I would agree. Chef with a strong take here saying Levis is a tank quarterback. He just hides it well. Maybe a shiny tank quarterback. And then, of course, Eddie in the comments here saying Chestnut career game, the nasty nut pounding the rock this week potentially. And then Marcus Washington in the chat here saying they'll lose the Titans. That's poor grammar and also poor spelling. Marcus, maybe want to check out one too many O's in that sentence right there. But I think that brings us to the next part of what the Titans have to do this week to be successful. And that's, protect Will Levis. And that starts with one of the biggest stories for the Tennessee Titans this past week, the death of John Njoku, as well as, elevating Leroy Watson to the active roster. And this is something we talked to Brian Callahan and the coordinators and the assistant coaches this week about, how it's very much a wide open competition for the right tackle spot right now. And that's probably not what a lot of people want to hear. You're in week 6 and you're still having a right tackle competition is not something anybody would like to hear. But, obviously it's been a right tackle carousel circus over there, but that's how they want to attack it because they are looking for a lot more consistency from that right tackle position. And so it looks like this week it will be either NPF or Leroy Watson this week. We talked to Brian Callahan earlier in the week about, when that decision would be made. They told us that on Thursday is their day fully in pads. So that's where those guys will ultimately get to face off between each other. And so I think, afterwards, they obviously didn't give anything away, but obviously I think the team does have an answer now, and it'll just be up to game time to see who actually does get the start there. Here's Bill Callahan on the right tackle situation right now and kind of their thoughts coming off the bye with that position.
Move forward. Yeah, we went through the bye week and looked at everything, in a very, very small sample size with 4 games. But we learned a lot about ourselves and what we want to accomplish from a technique perspective. And one of those things is being more competitive up front, being more, consistent in our protection. So we've taken, Nick, and we've taken Leroy and Jalen, and all those guys are competing right now. We haven't determined anything as of yet, but we're going to let the week play out and then make a decision here shortly.
So he echoes the sentiment here that they want consistency for this right tackle spot, something that they just haven't had all season. And Tim in the comments asked, how has Radens look? I think Radens, for the most part, has looked really, really good so far. I think he's been a strong right tackle spot or right guard spot. I don't know if you disagree with that, Stoney, but I think we've seen competent play from him. It's just been the lack of competency on the right side of him that maybe drags his game down a little bit.
Hey, pulling and pounding, that's Dylan Radens, man. I think he's really grown into the right guard spot pretty nicely. There have been some blocks in recent weeks where they pulled him across the formation to kind of blow open the hole on the other side of the line, and he's just crushing those blocks. So it's awesome to see, like, the speed, the athleticism to get out of his stance, to cross over, to be where he's supposed to be, when he's supposed to be there, and to just decleat a dude, opening up a hole for Tony Pollard. There were some times early on in the season that it kind of looked like he was in a little over his head. Had some whiffs kind of to the second level. I remember I noted specifically, but I think he's growing into this right guard spot pretty nicely. And man, if you look at just the past couple of weeks, I think outside AC Latham, he's probably been the most consistent offensive lineman.
Yeah, and so with that, I think we probably most likely, if I had to guess, gun to my head right now, who plays right tackle this week or who gets the majority. I do think there's a really good shot that Leroy Watson plays some decent amount of snaps this week, considering how talk about a short leash. I think if anybody has a leash on this week, it's MPF, because I think that's the biggest one to watch. And that's why they call Leroy Watson up, who is no stranger to being put in this position. Obviously, there is a reason they went out and got him for a 7th round pick this offseason, and that's because he has familiarity with Bill Callahan. He stepped up last year when there were injuries for the Cleveland Browns and played serviceable right tackle here. As Chef Rand says in the comments. And once again, if you're joining us live on Twitter or Facebook, come over to the comment section of Broadway Sports Media or 440's YouTube channel, where you can join the conversation here. Chef Rand says Leroy got to step up. And so we did also get the chance to talk to Bill Callahan about Leroy Watson and what he brings to the table potentially as a right tackle option. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, well, he's an interesting story because he was a tight end in college. And he's progressed, because of his athleticism. It's allowed him, to make the transition into a tackle. He's also gained, the weight and the strength that he needs to play that position. But his feet are a real asset. And so, he's got versatility to flex either side. We even had him at guard. He's even played a lot of guard once the preseason ended. So we like his versatility. We like the athleticism. So again, if he gets an opportunity on Sunday, it's all in his backyard.
2 things with that real quick. 1, I just have to comment on how Bill Callahan. I could listen to Bill Callahan talk about offensive linemen all day. Dude's a wizard.
Yeah,
like, it's insane to sometimes just sit there and be able to have the opportunity to just watch him talk about the offensive line, because he probably will know more about that position and that part of football than I will ever know in 3 lifetimes. 2, I do like the fact that, you know, the thing he brings up, and you were making a little bit of a face, so I'm interested to
I caught
see
something in there
that you maybe want to hark on here. But I think the biggest thing with Leroy Watson that he brings up is his footwork, something that NPF has really struggled with. And so that is something, and why I had him on my, you know, not to toot my own horn, but the thing I really found productive with Leroy Watson coming into the season was his versatility and that footwork. Basically, able to play anywhere on the line. I remember going back to training camp where I asked Leroy Watson about his versatility and that, and I, you know, this is the one FCC word of the day here. I remember when I asked him that, he said, "Any position on this field, I'll play and fuck them up." And so I thought that was a strong sentiment from Leroy Watson, but he does bring the footwork and the versatility that you may want from a swing tackle to play that right tackle position, especially in a pinch right now, considering when you review the tape, when you watch NPF, sometimes he barely even moves and just lets the guy go right by him. And so there is little to no footwork with an NPF. And so I think that really indicates and kind of makes my decision and the reasoning why I think Leroy Watson will definitely get some playing time this week.
I agree with you. And look, they put NPF on notice when they benched him, and now here we are weeks later talking about how he's going to be competing with yet another guy at the right tackle spot. I think that does indicate that he's probably not really improved to a point where this staff has ultimate faith in him to go out there, execute his responsibilities. This is a situation that is bad enough to be throwing shit against the wall just to see what sticks. You know what? Jalen Duncan, maybe he's a little hurt. Maybe he didn't cut it. Maybe they get him out there. They get somebody else in. They think it's Leroy Watson. They don't want to give my boy Ojukwu a chance. So that's what they're doing is like finding ways with what they have, the resources they have to address this position, because they're not getting the consistency out of NPF that they want to. The reason I made that is because Bill Callahan brings up his versatility and him playing guard throughout the preseason training camp, whichever, I don't recall. But I'm wondering how bad things have to get if they're wanting to rotate guys before they consider, hey, Dylan Radins is playing pretty well at right guard. Do we try and maybe kick him outside and see if he can be the answer at right tackle? And maybe we put Leroy Watson in at right guard. I mean, if this is a staff that is going to be changing things up and it's going to be a new right tackle competition essentially every week, how long until we get to that point? I mean, they're going to run out of options eventually, unless, you know, what are they going to do? Now they're going to call John Ojukwu back up and maybe give him the shot if Leroy Watson doesn't perform well at right tackle. And then what? Then what are you going to do if that doesn't work as well? What are you going to do if Leroy Watson doesn't work at right tackle? Eventually you're going to get to a spot where you need options. And I'm just wondering if that is something that's on the table, or if this staff is just, you know, take them for their word if they are just committed to Dylan Radins at right guard.
Yeah, I can't believe you would even bring that narrative back up. Now our mentions are going to be chock full of it, and I hate you for it. But Chef Rand says in the comments here, former tight ends at tackle make me giddy. I hope it works out. We have the proof to see historically. We have precedent to say that Leroy Watson can be a sustainable stopgap here. But Singer's Beverages, our wonderful sponsor, has been serving the East Nashville community for over 4 decades. They are a 3-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year, as voted on by you, because they simply have the best selection of beers, wine, and spirits that you could possibly ask for. You got to get out there. Their selection is absolutely incredible. And when you get out there, you also have to join their in-crowd for special benefits, allocations, and tastings. I know they do special tastings almost every other Friday. You can only know about those and when they're happening and what they are if you're not you got to join the in crowd to be a part of that. And I know they have very special bourbon allocations coming up. So the sooner you get on that list, the better chance you have to get some of their special stock that they have coming in the next couple weeks. Got to follow them also on all their social medias at SinkersBev. And if you can't make it out there, don't worry. They got you covered on Uber Eats. You can search Sinkers on Uber Eats and have the booze delivered to you because, Stoney, if you want to help me out here, what do they do?
They drive so you can drink.
Yeah, I mean, awesome. You know, doing an ad read, making your own comments in the comment section that I will not be bringing up here. I will not be answering said comment. You know, honestly, the ability here to comment, podcast, and do an ad read at the same time is why you're such a valued member of this podcast right here. I'm not even going to address your comment either. I'm just going to let the people who are listening on the airwaves here don't
tell me that because I'll just say it out loud. I do have a microphone.
You do have a microphone. You do have the power. But I got to finish my ad read because special thanks also to their sister store, Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, as he puts the cup up here, who's been serving that Hendersonville community for over 50 years. Special thanks to Sinkers and Bluegrass Beverages. All right, Stoney, let us continue.
Right tackle.
We're not okay. We're gonna move on here to something I think is it's not nothing, right? I think it is worth addressing here, and that's the special teams issue that will be pretty important come Sunday, because I think this is still an ongoing issue. It's not been that long since last year against the Indianapolis Colts. Ryan Stonehouse gets murdered on the field stadium by the Indianapolis Colts, and where he suffers a season-ending injury, and then subsequently gets the special teams coordinator Craig Ackerman fired. We got to talk to Colt Anderson yesterday about the almost block punt that the Miami Dolphins were almost able to obtain in their primetime game against the Titans. And, you know, I think Colt Anderson had a really interesting answer. Here's what he had to say about the almost block punt in the primetime game.
It's certainly unacceptable. We take pride in protection. In that certain case, they were in their punt safe look. So I think they were only rushing 4 at that time. So end of the day, we got to be more physical, block with more physicality, and use our hands and just do our job.
I don't know about you, Stoney. Obviously, and this is something Paul Kaharski brought up, and I know that you can watch the tape and see it with your own eyes, but the fact that Colt Anderson was willingly able to get up in front of us and say that they were in a punt-safe look and only rushing 4 and still almost blocked the punt is absolutely unacceptable, in my opinion. Especially, I know Calais Campbell has wrecked the league for years, but considering they're only rushing 4 and you're still almost getting your punts blocked, I wonder if there is another one in this game. How, you know, we're just talking about a lot of leashes this week, but how short is Colt Anderson's leash, considering that, you know, you obviously the first 2 weeks are unacceptable, and then you almost get one blocked on the almost the most impossible look to get one blocked on, which is 4. Yeah. You know, I do start to wonder how effective he is right now coaching that special teams unit.
I don't know, JT, because I mean, is it just a personnel issue? If you're volunteering this information that they're only rushing 4 and they're still nearly blocking punts, like, is it as simple as just, well, why don't you get bigger, stronger guys out there? Like, is Colt Anderson running the personnel grouping for this? I would assume so, right? I mean, he's the special teams coordinator. Why not look to your bigger, stronger guys to hold up there? And you know what? I mean, shake things up. We're seeing this right tackle competition unfold on a week-to-week basis, where they're just calling guys up like, hey, let's Leroy Watson, it's your turn. Come on down, baby. Can they not do the same thing for special teams and kind of rotate different guys in to stop this? Because I don't know, man. How do you overcome that if you're lining up out there against lighter formations and you're still being pushed back? Get stronger guys out there.
Yeah, and people have talked about is taking a decent bit of time to get those punts off. I don't think that should matter for one, for the most part, because just block better. Like it shouldn't matter how fast he's getting the punt off if you can just execute on the punt protection.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just something I wanted to bring up because I was not satisfied with that answer. I really haven't been satisfied with their production and what he's brought to the table either. And obviously this game it means something probably to a Ryan Stonehouse who is returning to the field against the team who absolutely destroyed his leg last year. And I think that's something that needs to be emphasized this week in this game.
I don't watch special teams tape. I'll be honest with our viewers. I don't. We
might have to now. We might have to.
But now that we're talking about it, I do want to go back and watch like the rotation of the guys that he's regularly using. And I would be interested in his philosophy as why those guys. If this keeps happening, why those guys?
Yeah, I agree.
I think that's a fair question.
Yeah, I mean, the guys who we've seen out there are Jack Gibbons and Julius Chestnut are the two guys who are mainly responsible for the block punts. But I don't know who. Yeah, those are the two guys who have been mainly on punt protection there, who have kind of missed their blocks and the reason why those have continued to get blocked. But it's frustrating. It's confusing. I think it's something we need to dive into a little bit more. But we'll have to see this Sunday against the Colts. Just a quick aside on that, but. Getting to the defensive side of the ball, because there is a whole Indianapolis offense that still can be dangerous. And, Anthony Richardson has not looked the best this year, I will say, but there are flashes out there that I think, you have to prepare for. You have to prepare for Anthony Richardson at his best. And I think we talked to Denard Wilson yesterday about Anthony Richardson and what he brings to the table. Yes, Paul, this is the shirt. Yeah, this is the shirt. So
I can't
my
comment
fancy
on
weird shirt. But nevertheless, this is what Denard Wilson had to say about preparing for Anthony Richardson.
To me is he compares to like when Cam Newton was in the league. He's a big man. I mean, he looks like a DN. He can run. He's strong. He doesn't go down on first contact. And then obviously with the arm, he has tremendous arm talent. I mean, he can throw the ball 70 yards, so you have to be able to stop him from running and then also keep a roof over the top of the defense to eliminate the explosive plays.
Yeah, I think, you have to give credit to Anthony Richardson, especially, he also commented on how tough it's been for this team to every single week. It seems like game plan for two quarterbacks, and these two quarterbacks in particular cannot be more different. Like you have Joe Flacco, the statue of Joe Flacco back there, who's just going to absolutely ricochet and catapult that ball down the field. And then you have Anthony Richardson, who is an absolute wild card, like he said. And so, it looks like it will be Anthony Richardson this week. And that brings up the question once again, that instead of more blitzing the quarterback this week, it's about containing Anthony Richardson and making him make the mistakes on his own instead of necessarily forcing him. This is a team, you have a matchup this week against the Titans and the Colts where both teams are tied for the lead in terms of interceptions with 6. You have two absolute wild cards this week in Anthony Richardson and Will Levis. And I think that's a point of emphasis this week. As much as you want to count that first turnover the Titans got, that was really a give me. The Titans have not forced a turnover yet this year of their own real doing. Like Tyreek Hill just simply dropped that ball. There's nothing the Titans did on that play to deserve that turnover. But I think that's going to be another big key this week, is making Anthony Richardson turn the ball over. And that's really going to rely on the heels of the secondary. It's once again a secondary that's going to have L'Jarius Sneed back in fully healthy this week. You're going to have also Jarvis Brownlee Jr., who was a big point of emphasis for this team last week. Obviously, with Awuzie going on IR, someone had to step up, and Jarvis Brownlee Jr., the 5th-round pick rookie this year, seemed to really step up this past week. And so I had the chance to ask Denard Wilson about what he's seen from Jarvis Brownlee Jr. in some, increased role, in an increased capacity. And I think he had a really interesting answer, which went from Jarvis Brownlee Jr. to then L'Jarius Sneed and his thoughts on Sneed. Here's what he had to say.
Just like Tavondre,
The more action he gets better. The one thing that I love, about him playing was his tenacity. He was going up against receivers that are fast, that a lot of people don't go and challenge. And he was up to the challenge. He went down. He was pressing. He was physical rerouting. He stayed on top. He was connected at the top of the routes. And then obviously when you have L'Jarius Sneed, who's in the room with him, they have very similar personalities as players. I think that also helps. And then going on to Sneed, sometimes I don't think he gets the respect that he deserves. I think he's the best corner in the National Football League. And he's not afraid of any challenge. He's not afraid of anyone. And I would just love to see him compete.
What are the challenges?
High praise for both Jarvis Brownlee Jr. and L'Jarius Sneed. Stoney, your thoughts on what the secondary has to do this week to get the best of Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, I think it's simple. Keep your powder dry down the field because he's incredibly erratic underneath. I think you see the highlights of him just bombing throws way down the field, and it's this highlight play that gets all these retweets and shares on social media, and everybody's like, wow, what a rocket Anthony Richardson has. And then the next 7 throws are going to be overthrows to the boundary out there where his guy's open and he's just throwing 5 feet over his head. It's got to be a really frustrating spot to be in for Colts fans to watch this guy the way he's so up and down. It's such a roller coaster with him right now. But I think you have to kind of remain disciplined and understand where this quarterback can beat you, and where he can beat you is over the top. And to go back to what I said at the top of the show, Alec Pierce is a fast guy, has good hands and good length. They're going to send him down the field. And if he gets behind the secondary, it's going to be trouble. That's one of the 2 things that I think they have to do to really cap this Colts offense with Anthony Richardson at the helm, is just be in position. Don't let your guy get behind you down the field. And then, clog up the run lanes. Like these linebackers are fast in pursuit of the run. They fill their gaps. They get to the edge. Theoretically, that's a matchup that I think that Kenneth Murray and Jones IV are up for. I think they can handle this guy. I know he's a big physical runner, but he's not 100% at this point. And I think he does his damage in case when he can kind of lower his shoulder and get physical with guys. And I think the Titans have the linebackers to match that. So it is a matchup that should favor the Titans defense. Now, if he gets going the underneath stuff, maybe that's a different conversation. Like they're talking in Indianapolis right now about how, Anthony Richardson needs to round out his game, and how long is it going to be before it clicks for him? He starts hitting on all these throws. It's not so different from what we're talking about with Will Levis right here. So what if this is the game that Anthony Richardson wakes up in? That's an entirely different conversation. But as things stand now, I think you've got to keep an eye on Alec Pierce. Don't let him get behind the defense, and you've got to be up for the challenge of tackling Anthony Richardson and bringing him down in space.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a good point that with going up against Alec Pierce, I think it's going to be another game where they're going to have to rely on the 5th-round rookie, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., pretty heavily in that spot with Awuzie down. Just a quick aside on Jarvis, because he continues to impress me. As a guy we both really liked from the Senior Bowl to now being with the Titans, he has continued to look like the steal of the draft, maybe. Getting him in the 5th round like that, he continues to pay dividends for this Titans team. I asked him yesterday about, Denard Wilson had very high praise for him in that tenacity and the aggressiveness he plays with. So I asked him, obviously getting your first run as a starter, quote unquote starter against Miami, do you feel more comfortable now, even though you are a rookie? And with that comfortability, does that allow you to unlock a little bit more of that aggressiveness and tenacity? And so here's what he had to say.
Of course, and I think that just comes with just moving fast. And what I mean by that is just knowing my playbook and knowing the things that I got. I feel like once I got my playbook out the way, then I could play much faster, and the game could slow down for me. So for me, man, it's just making the game slow down for me and playing with the edge and just playing loose, and just go, man, let it loose and just play free. I'm a rookie, so man, I'm going to make mistakes, but it's how you come back from those mistakes. It's how you face adversity and how you overcome that. So for me, man, I've been through a lot. I faced adversity. So for me, I feel like it's nothing too big or too small that I can't handle or fix. So for me, man, it's just keep going, man, and just let it loose.
Thought it was a very strong answer from the fifth round rookie there. Stoney, anything else before we move on to our best bets about this game that you wanted to share from your notebook, or just unloading any thoughts that are still on the top of your head? I'm a little scared to ask considering what you've already thrown in the comment section of this episode, but I will give the floor to you before we move on to our best bets.
I can't comment on weird shirts because I never wear them, so I'm not an expert. I'm not an expert on weird shirts. Yes. And in regards to Jarvis Brownlee, I love him. One thing that I do want to mention is consistency with him. And what I mean is this guy's just a football player. He's been a football player everywhere he's been. Consistent Louisville tape, consistent week at the Senior Bowl, consistent throughout the summer. Now we're seeing him get a chance, not just in meaningful game action, but in meaningful game action against Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, one of the fastest, if not the fastest, wide receiver core in the NFL. And he's holding his own. He's doing the things well right now that he was doing well as a Louisville Cardinal. And I think that has to inspire a lot of confidence in this player as he continues to grow under Denard Wilson.
Yeah, I agree. And so that it's going to be a very interesting game, a sneaky high octane game, I think, this weekend between the Colts and the Titans. Now let's move on to our best bet gauntlet for week 6 here. Stoney, you had yourself a bounce back week last week, going 4-1 on your picks. I went 2-3. Continued to be frustrating, but that's, like you say, we got to bet through it. And that comes back with this week. I feel really good about our slates this week. And so we'll be betting by some guidelines. And I think those guidelines this week are backing the big underdogs and backing home divisional dogs this week. And so without further ado, let's get into the best bet gauntlet for week 6. I'm going to kick it off by taking New England Patriots. Yes, the New England Patriots with Drake May plus 6.5. Going up against a Houston Texans team, which I don't believe is all of that. I think Nico Collins being down is a big deal. You also look at just some of the trends. NFL underdogs of 6 or more points this season are 11-8 straight up and 16-2-1 against the spread. 89% through 5 weeks covering that spread by 7.8 points per game. CJ Stroud also as a favorite of over 3 or more in his short career is 2-7 against the spread. I think, Drake May, it's not that much, even though you may not have the greatest outlook on Drake May coming out of the draft. I don't think it's that much of a decrease from what Jacoby Brissett was doing out there. I also really like what this New England defense has been able to do. And I think this is a sneaky gross spot where you see New England keep it to under a touchdown here. So I'm going to take New England plus 6.5 being the underdog this week.
I don't hate the pick, man. I was on this show earlier saying, hey, don't sleep on the Patriots defense. This is not a game we should just be registering as a win for the Titans automatically, given how they're playing right now. And you think the quarterback change could spark something? We typically see that. I'm going to stay in the AFC East for my first pick, and I'm going to stay with a significant change in head coach in this case with the New York Jets. I know the typical betting rule is that these things, you change the quarterback, you change the head coach, typically sparks the team. They rally around each other and they perform well. I just don't like this Jets team on offense. They just blow. And I don't care who's calling the plays. Aaron Rodgers hasn't looked the same. I think this Buffalo team is maybe not what we thought it was the first couple of weeks of the season, but I still think this is a really talented team that can go in there and push the Jets around. The number is sitting there at 2.5. I like the Bills to cover that. That's my first pick this week.
Is it a little too rich to say that it feels kind of like a desperation spot for the Bills needing this win?
No, I don't think so.
3 in a row. I think this is a spot where they need to win badly. Both these teams need to win badly, but it's a pretty desperate spot for Josh Allen. I agree with that one. I like that pick a lot. With my second pick this week in the best bet gauntlet, one of my favorite home divisional dogs this week, Denver plus 3. playing or hosting the Los Angeles Chargers. Look, it can't be overstated how good this Denver defense has looked so far this season. Obviously, the Chargers may get a little bump coming off the bye there, but that Chargers team is not very much a prolific offense between what you saw the Raiders last week and what you're seeing now from the Chargers. They're able to run the ball a lot better, but I don't think the passing game between Gardner Minshew and what Justin Herbert's been able to do with that cast of characters on the wide receiver position this year is much different from what they're seeing. Sean Payton also, as an underdog in his career, has been extremely profitable, 56, 36, and 2 against the spread as an underdog in his career. He's the 4th best against the spread coach as a dog in terms of win percentage since 1990. This is a spot where I think when you look at Denver, this is a team last year where they carried the Russell Wilson corpse of a Broncos team to 8-ish wins. I think this is a spot, once again, where this team isn't as bad as people might think. And so that's why I'm going to take the full 3 here and take the divisional dog in this game at home.
I almost took the under in this game because you got two of the 2 best defenses in football going at it.
Yeah,
but
a very
even
low total game as well. Yeah.
At 35.5 last I checked, I got to draw the line somewhere on these unders. So I'm staying away from that one, but I am going to stick with a good defense and a disgusting sicko team. And I'm going to go back to the well with Pittsburgh Steelers because they are field goal favorites against the Las Vegas Raiders. You touched on it last week. I don't need to elaborate any further. This Raiders team feels like an absolute dumpster fire right now. They can't get anything going. I know Pittsburgh's reeling a little bit right now, but I actually liked the way that they played against Dallas and thought they had a good shot of winning that game, if not for a heroic touchdown late in that one. I'm not buying on the Pittsburgh necessarily being as bad as everybody thinks they are. I'm going to stick with them and their defense to really rattle the Raiders and cover this number pretty easily.
Yeah, with my next pick here, this is it's a gross slate, but I have a feeling that it's a gross slate because I think we're on the right side of a lot of these. And the next one I'm going to take here is I'm going to take the Cleveland Browns as 9.5-point underdogs against the Philadelphia Eagles coming off the bye. This is once again, the trends are too good this year. Underdogs at this big of a spread have been so profitable that you have to bet it. Once again, I'll reiterate, NFL underdogs of 6 points or more are now 11-8 straight up and 16-2-1 against the spread, covering that spread by 7.8 points per game. I still think that this Cleveland defense is very, very strong, and I think they keep them in this game, no matter how bad Deshaun Watson has looked. This is a Philadelphia Eagles team that so far this year has played down to their competition, have not been able to put teams away very much or very often. You also just look at historically at Jalen Hurts as a favorite of over 7 points. He is 3-7-1 against the spread and is 1-7 against the spread in his last 8 starts in this spot. I think, there's a lot of people I think that are already considering calling for Nick Sirianni's head this early in the season, much like people were calling for Robert Saleh's position, even if that is a surprise. I know, as Kenneth says, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith both back. I don't think it matters in this spot because of how good that defense has been. I think it's going to be a gross, close game this week, and so that's why I'm taking the Browns plus 9.5.
Man, this really is a gross, disgusting slate of games this week because I'm going to keep the train rolling. I'm going to go to Chicago, and I'm going to back the Bears here as 1.5-point favorites against the Jags. I'm not buying that
the London Jags. The London Jags.
Yeah, I'm not buying that the Jags are all that after a rebound win against this Colts team, and I feel like Chicago is kind of finding their footing right now. I like the way that they're playing defense, and Caleb Williams seems to be hitting a stride. I'm not going to say he's hitting his stride, but he's hitting a stride, if that makes sense. He's getting somewhere. I don't know that he's at his full ceiling yet, of course, but it's starting to come together for him. I like the way they're playing right now, and I'm not going to lean into I'm not going to lean too much into last week for this Jacksonville team. So give me the Bears at 1.5.
My fourth pick in the best bet gauntlet here, I'm taking the New Orleans Saints, the Spencer Rattler-led New Orleans Saints as a divisional home dog of a spread 3.5. This is always a field goal game. No matter who the quarterbacks are, these teams play each other close. And I think, the fact that this line last week, the look ahead line, opened up as New Orleans -2.5. And now with Spencer Rattler in, they move to 3.5-point underdogs. I don't think Derek Carr matters that much to this team. And I know they're coming off a very disappointing loss to the Kansas City Chiefs where they looked a little bit lifeless, but I really am excited to see what Spencer Rattler can do because I am a part of the agenda, the Spencer Rattler agenda. I am one of their strongest soldiers. You also just look at Baker Mayfield in this spot. He has struggled on extended rest in his career, just 8-11 straight up and 7-12 against the spread, including a 2-7 straight up record on the road in this spot. He's also the second worst quarterback against the spread versus divisional opponents since he was drafted. He's only ahead of Sam Darnold for that spot. This is one where I think Baker Mayfield and this team play down to their competition this week. And I don't think Spencer Rattler, offers that much less of Derek Carr. If anything, I think he improves in his ability to scramble outside the pocket. I know that this is a banged up New Orleans line, but I think that provides a part of his game that Derek Carr really didn't bring. So with that, I'm going to take another divisional dog here and take New Orleans +3.5.
I'm going to keep it in the NFC South, but I'm going to go to this Atlanta-Carolina game. I don't know what's going to happen here as far as who wins, but I'm looking at both of these offenses, and I'm thinking Carolina has at least stabilized a little bit with Andy Dalton at the helm. Kirk Cousins really seemed to get into a rhythm on Thursday Night Football. They're rested up. This Falcons offense seems to be hitting another gear. I like the over here. The point total is set at 46.5. I think that's one that, quite frankly, maybe the Falcons could cover on their own against this Carolina Panthers team. But regardless, I like the side north of that number.
All righty, so that is your fourth pick there. My last pick here for the best bet gauntlet this week, I'm taking Detroit. -3.
I love it.
Against the Dallas Cowboys. I think the Cowboys are riding high, barely scraping away a victory at Pittsburgh. Now they have to face a Detroit team fully healthy finally, coming off the bye. I think that's a scary spot for this team. This is going to be a high-octane game where I think both teams are going to do a lot of scoring, but I think it ends one way or another. With one team winning by a touchdown. In this case, I think Detroit is just the better team top to bottom. Aiden Hutchinson playing like the defensive player of the year so far with his production, especially against that Dallas offensive line who has looked okay, but certainly not Dallas Cowboys lines of old. You look at the injuries on the defensive side of the ball for Dallas, Micah Parsons, Marshawn Nealon, all these guys, banged up, and that is a team that is really hurting, especially in the run department, in the run defense department. And what are the Detroit Lions like to do against you? They like to run the ball and shove it down your mouth, and I think Dan Campbell knows that. And this is a team that I think is going to take care of business against the Cowboys. So give me Detroit -3.
Say less, fam. I love the Lions in that spot. I'm going to keep my last pick simple. I want the fireworks show. Arizona at Green Bay. Point total is set at 47.5. These two offenses are clicking right now. I think there's going to be some points in this one. Let that over, baby. Over 47.5 for Arizona at Green Bay.
So that's going to do it for our best bets for week 6. To recap, I am taking the grossest slate of my entire life, taking New England +6.5, Denver +3, Cleveland +9.5, New Orleans +3.5, and Detroit -3. 4 underdogs, 1 favorite. Stoney, you're going with Bills -2.5, Steelers -3, Chicago -1.5. 3 favorites. Atlanta and Carolina over 46.5, and then the over in the Packers-Cardinals game, which is 47.5. Kenneth in the comments says, nobody backing the Bengals. Is this for JT's sanity combined with nerves on the Mets? You betcha. I've decided I can't. Teams that I'm actively involved with, whether covering them or rooting for them, I just can't do it. That's too much for me right now. But I don't hate, as Kenneth says. I assume he means Bengals -3.5 for a Joe Burrow angry game. Guaranteed bet. I do like that spot here on Sunday night, or Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, one of the two. But that's going to do it for the Hot Read podcast today. It should be a good one this weekend between the Tennessee Titans and the Ponies from Indianapolis. We will be back on Tuesday to recap everything that goes down in this game. But until then, thank you once again to Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages for sponsoring the show. This has been the Hot Read podcast. Enjoy your weekend this weekend.
Meet me in the parking lot, Seth.